Squadron, its Commander Redacted. So this is going to be the first video in a little series I'm going to be doing covering Visual Link, or LOC, which stands for Line of Communication. So this is going to be tactics that revolve around larger teams, typically any team that has over 6 guys in it. Since Bravo Squadron has been growing rather significantly over the last few months, and also since we've been connecting with other teams outside of Bravo Squadron, primarily the Task Force 195 guys, who join us for both, who fairly frequently now are joining us for both our official events and our casual play as well. Our group sizes have grown rather significantly, and it's time to start implementing tactics that are better suited for larger teams. Again, typically when I refer to a larger team, I mean any team that's over 6 guys generally. So our tactics and general procedures have been more focused around smaller elements, typically the 3-man teams, 4-man teams, and so forth. And that obviously works just fine for when you actually when you're running those smaller elements. And generally speaking, when you're running smaller elements, the team is going to stick together. So they're going to flow from room to room together, not really going to split up very much. And that's exactly how smaller elements should operate. However, once you start pushing 7 guys, 8 guys, or more, that's no longer really an effective method of clearing a structure. It's a waste of manpower, and it's along with other reasons as well that I'll get to here in a second. So now that Bravo Squadron again is growing, we're starting to see more and more people both playing for official events and in casual play. It's time to start implementing these tactics into our procedures, so that way we know what to do when we are running larger elements. So what we're going to be implementing again is something called Visual Link, or LOC, which is short for Line of Communication. And really kind of the down and dirty of this is it allows a larger element to branch out and divide itself into separate smaller elements, and allows them to work and control more rooms within a structure at a given time, while at the same time still staying visually linked to each other. That's why it's commonly referred to as visual link. So let's say an 8-man team is split up into 3 different elements and they're in 3 separate rooms. Although technically they've divided, the entire team's divided into 3 separate elements, they're still connected to each other. And they're connected to each other because at least one guy from each element can see at least one other guy from another element. Therefore, they're connected. That'll make a little bit more sense once I run through a demonstration here on Door Kickers 2. So what's the advantage of doing this? Well, number one, it allows for more effective and efficient use of manpower. So when you're running a smaller element, your manpower is relatively limited, right? So let's say you have a 4-man team. So that 4-man team is just going to flow together. They're going to go to room together, clearing one room at a time typically. And that entire team just going to flow as one singular element throughout the entire time. They're not going to be splitting up really at all. However, when you're running a larger element, that's not very effective because stacking up an entire 8-man element or an entire 8-man team on a single door and dedicating the entire team to that one room, generally speaking, is just not effective, and it's just a waste of manpower. And it also puts the majority of that team at risk for really no reason, because at least 4 of those guys really aren't going to have a job that the other 4 guys couldn't have done already. So I'll just go ahead and just kind of list 3 major reasons why Visual Link and LOC is better for larger teams. I kind of already covered the first one. It's just a more effective use of manpower. And generally speaking, we're only going to dedicate as many men, as much manpower as we need to individual doors and rooms as needed, and really not anymore unless called upon specifically. So generally speaking, we're only going to commit 2 or 3 guys, preferably, to one door and one room at a time, and really no more unless we need them otherwise. We just know that that room we need more men in here because that room has a lot of problems. Maybe it has a lot of open doors. Maybe it has several people who surrendered, so forth and so forth. Where we now know that we need more manpower in here. But as a general rule, we're only going to dedicate 2 to 3 guys in a room at a time. So that allows the other teammates um, to either control another room, go attack another room, and clear another room, or just simply be out of the way because they're just not needed. Um, so that's the first reason why we want to use this style of clearance because it's just a more effective use of manpower. The second reason is that it mitigates risk. I kind of already covered this too, but there's really no reason to stack up an entire 8-man team on a single door and dedicate all of them to a singular room um, because a huge portion of that team is not going to have a job. They're just going to be basically sitting in a line um, waiting to make entry into a room, and by the time they make entry, the room's already cleared. Um, so it's just a waste of man. They don't have any jobs, so they're just there, basically being a target. Um, if you think of worst case scenario, let's say you had the entire 8-man team stacked up on a single door, and you open the door and the door was rigged, or there's a guy sitting there. You open up the door and there's a guy standing there grinning at you with an S vest on. And he clacks off the vest, or there's a barricade PKM. Name your worst case scenario, whatever. Instead of only a partial um, instead of only a partial how should I say this? Instead of only some of the guys from the team potentially becoming casualties at the door, now you've risked the entire team becoming a casualty at that single door, and for really no reason, because again, most of that team didn't have any use being there. But however, if you only dedicate 2 or 3 guys to that door, now only a partial of that team can potentially become a casualty at that door. So it mitigates risk on that front. And also, finally, it allows the team to control more real estate within a given structure at any given time. So instead of the entire team being only in one room, the team can be broken up into 2 elements or 3 elements or potentially more, depending on the team size, and they can control and clear many different rooms of that structure at one point, which makes it a lot harder for any Op4 to flank you, get up on your rear security, and so forth. So generally speaking, the more real estate that we can control within a structure at any given time, the better. Obviously, if the structure has any sort of size to it, you're going to have to give up control of rooms to push further down the structure. But again, you're still controlling more real estate of that structure at any given time as you flow through it using this style of clearance. So with that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and run through a quick demonstration in door kickers and give you just a basic rundown of what Visual Link kind of looks like in real time. Now, there's a lot of nuance to this that I'm going to cover in other videos as to not make this video like 3 hours long. So yeah, there's like a lot of detail and stuff that I'm just gonna pass over. I'll make videos on it later on. But this is just a general rundown of it. Basically, the entire point of this video is just to define Visual Link and LOC and give kind of a brief description of it and demonstration of. So at this point, they're just going to work this door like normally we would. This is an 8-man team. Working kind of near to far here as we normally would. All right, we have a closed door. Obviously, we have an entire hallway here with many closed doors. So we're just going to go ahead and take this first door. Now, again, we only want to dedicate 2 to 3 guys on a door at a time. Typically, 3 is preferred if we have the manpower to spare. So working off that, we know that we need at least 1 guy to hold forward security at all times. So that's at least 1 guy, and we had 3 guys to spare to work the door. So that's 3. So that's a total of 4. So only if 4 guys are going to enter this hallway to work this door. No more. These guys are basically just going to stay out of the way. Right now, they don't really have a job here because this is where they spawned, but again, it's better that they just stay out of the way and not put themselves in unnecessary risk. So at this point, this team here, this element is going to work this door and then make entry to the room and clear the room. Okay, so we got one guy here. He's going to maintain control over the long of this hallway the entire time, so that way we remain control over the hallway. And these guys right here are really important. So these two guys right here currently, these guys are known as LOCs, or lines of communication. So like I said in the beginning, even though the team is spreading out and branching out throughout the structure, they're still going to remain visually connected with each other via at least one guy within each separate element having the ability to see at least one other guy from a separate element. So right now the team's split up into two separate elements. We have this element right here and this element right here. And these guys right here, these LOCs, are their visual connection and their lines of communication to each element. So this guy is basically responsible for this element, and this guy is responsible for this element. So the fact that these two guys right here can see each other, it connects both these elements. So if they need to communicate between each other, these are the guys that would do it, hence lines of communication. These guys also have other jobs as well, or at least one of them is going to have another job, and that is being a controller, meaning he's going to make decisions on what the next move for the team is going to be. That's really important, but I'll talk about that in a separate video. I'll talk about probably in the next video. I'll talk about specifically the roles of the LOC and the controller. But again, this guy and this guy, these two are LOCs because they are lines of communication. They connect. Another term for them is links or link men, because these guys link both these elements together. So at this point we have this open door, which is going to get taken next. So he calls for two. Again, we want at least a minimum of two guys to work a room / door, minimum at least. There are exceptions to that, of course, but as a general rule. And one guy holding forward security. Now, of course, in talking about manpower, and the dedication of manpower that you want for individual rooms and problems, at this point they made entry into this room, the two guys at least, well, technically three, and they found that they had two closed doors, which they wanted more manpower for. So they called it for one other guy to enter the room and basically support this element. Okay, now at this point, this element here is going to move up, and they're going to take this door. Now this guy broke back. As he was sitting in this doorway, he was acting as an LOC, but this guy moved back, so that way as this element works this door, he's not exposed to the 90. So sometimes you have to technically break linkage in order for the safety of the LOC, because obviously he doesn't want to just stand here as they open this door. That'd be stupid. So he's going to break link just for his own safety, obviously, and get back. So once they start actually working this room and making entry, he will push back and reestablish link. Okay, so right now again, the team is still broken up into two elements. This element And this element, once these guys work this door, this guy will push back and reestablish link. So this guy will become a linkman again, and then this guy would also be a linkman. The reason why these two guys aren't linkmen is because one's holding rear security, the other one's holding forward security. So they have dedicated jobs, right? So he can't be looking around communicating with other people. So it would go to this guy right here. He would actually be the line of communication. Again, I'll talk about more specifics in the next video. So at this point, the team's now broken up into, I don't want to really say three separate elements. They're not really, because this entire group right here is really just one element. But again, we're in basically three different rooms, right? So these guys right here are connected by this guy who can see this guy who can now connect them to this guy, right? So again, line of communication. Okay. And that right there is a basic demonstration of visual link slash LOC. Again, there's a lot of nuance here that I didn't cover here. I'm just going to make separate videos on to not make this particular video too long. This was just meant to be a kind of part one, just describing and defining LOC slash visual link and giving you a really brief description and demonstration of it. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the LOCs and controllers and their roles, and then another video I'm going to do more specific. So in the next video, I'm going to describe other things that are also really important in terms of decision making. When do we want to work doors? And so forth. So again, there's a lot of nuance here. I'm just going to make separate videos on just to not make one super long video. So that's it for part one. I hope you found this at least understandable and you got kind of a basic idea of what visual link and LOC is. And hopefully you'll see the next video and the follow-on videos as well that I'm going to make for the server. Thanks so much, guys.